Kasi nandito kami ulit. Makikita mo na kami all the time. To make sure.
Total, ilang session days na naman
But
bigay.
you do it all the time.
Oo nga.
Kahit saan.
Pero
Thank you, I got it.
yung concurrent na resolution.
Christmas.
Sa partisan.
Oo, Christmas na ako. Sabi ko total tapos na ang budget. Masaya na. Christmas spirit na eh.
Pero yung pwede naman yung ma'am.
Ano ba ang mga ngayon? Yun daw may mga DFA daw na ratification.
Yes ma'am, kasi ang kahapon dapat sponsor ni Senator Pimentel yung concurrent resolution giving permission to Ambassador Hernandez to receive an award. Ganun tayo kailangan. So, nauna ang House, nag-concur na sila, so mag-concur na lang tayo. Sa kanilang concurrence. Huwag na natin. Ayan na lang tayo.
Basahin na lang. That's
Basahin
it.
na lang ma'am. Mamaya na ma'am, kasama to sa...
Pero nandyan si daw si
Yes ma'am, pang third additional reference. Kasi kailangan din basahin. Maganda ikaw.
sponsor. Ano yun?
Kickboxing, nandun na sa'yo sir. Tapos na pina-finalize na. Isa lang yung kickboxing. Individual ba sila? Isa lang. Yun yung kapag naman nila. So meron pa rin tayong resolution. It's the same resolution that Senator Pong signed. Kaya lang wala na. Mag-concur na kayo na nauna na magpasa.
Ano yung pansin? Sinabi namin kaya ni Maduro. Pero tama yan. Dalawa.
Women and men.
Yung women's yun yung most interesting. Kasi sa yung
First time I come here.
marami na po na naging mistake. And there was one time, they were leading by 2 points.
2 points na
Kami nakashoot ng 3 points. That's a hard play.
ganun din yung nangyari nung araw dun sa Asian Games naman yun. Rating na isa men's naman.
Oo. Parang huli yan.
Ang daming bilisan.
Rock and roll. Ano ba team natin? Ano ba team natin? Ah, 80s. Takong ba ako? I'm a son of the 80s. Wala akong list. Ay, dito, Frank.
The session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd just like to acknowledge with us today our guests. We have students, grade 12 students of Pateros Catholic School are here with us. I presume these are the ladies and gentlemen on our right side. And good afternoon to them. And also we have with us the Philippine kickboxing team, the team of Senator Francis Tol Tolentino.
Welcome to the Senate, to our students and to our athletes.
We have with us Ma'am Gina Inyong, Jerry Olsim, Jean-Claude Saclag, Jomar Bolangi, Renalyn Daquiel, Carol Magide, Rex De Lara, Roel Catalan, Randy Kaluag, the head coach, Mark Sangyao, the other assistant coach, and Glenn Mondol, assistant coach, and Donnie Geisler, also assistant coach. Is Donnie here? Oh, Donnie is also our Olympian and SEA Games champion sa Taekwondo. Yeah, nice to see them.
All right.
So
Welcome,
it's
welcome
nice
to
to
the
have
Senate.
them with us, Mr. President.
Yes, welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President,
Are we now ready with the journal or not yet?
yes, we're ready with the journal, Mr. President. I move to dispense with the reading of the journal of the 38th session, Monday, December 9, 2019. Consider the same as approved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, journal is approved.
Do we have reference of business? Yeah. Mr. President, I move for the reference of business before we
Yes, this is
recognize our...
second additional reference of business.
That's correct, Mr. President.
Secretary will proceed.
Second additional reference of business, bills on first reading. Senate Number 1220 entitled An Act Strengthening Republic Act Number 9208 as amended by Republic Act Number 10364 entitled An Act to Institute Policies to Eliminate Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, establishing the necessary institutional mechanisms for the protection and support of trafficked persons, providing penalties for its violations, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
Referred to the Committees on Women and Science and Technology.
Senate Number 1221, an act providing for a Magna Carta for workers, enterprises, and organizations in the informal economy and institutionalizing mechanisms for recognition, integration, and transition to the formal economy for implementation thereof and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Ontiveros.
Referred to the Committee on Labor, Social Justice, and Finance.
Senate Number 1222, an act promoting the development of agricultural land, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
Senate Number 1223, an act providing the national energy policy and regulatory framework for the use of electric vehicles and the establishment of electric charging stations, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
Referred to the Committees on Energy, Public Services, and Ways and Means.
Resolution. Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 3 entitled Concurrent Resolution Giving Consent to His Excellency Raul S. Hernandez, former Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of the Philippines to the Republic of Korea from 28 May 2014 to 30 April 2019 to receive the award of the Order of Diplomatic Service Merit First Class from the Government of the Republic of Korea, introduced by Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Rules.
Committee Report Number 27, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Basic Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance on Senate Number 1224 with Senators Zubiri, Villar, Villanueva, Binay, Lacson, and Gatchalian as authors thereof, entitled An Act Institutionalizing Comprehensive Values Education in the K-12 Curriculum as a Core Subject, including Good Manners and Right Conduct, and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Numbers 310, 860, and 1185, sponsor Senator Gatchalian.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Ginugulo mo ako. Team Dota ba to? Ay, ito ba? Ito na? Team Dota. Mr. President, we also have some of our SEA Games athletes. We have with us the successful Team Android Dota Philippines. The members include John Anthony Vargas. These are gold medalists, Mr. President. McNicholson Villanueva, June Canejera, Marvin Rushton, Brian Aviso, Coach Paul Ray Valero, team owner Rondolph Martin Gonzalez, and Ashby Rivera, also team, I guess these are team managers. They don't, team owners. They're here with us as well, Mr. President.
All right, welcome to the Senate. Welcome to our athletes and congratulations.
Ay ako lang, Mr. President, ang alam ko is Atari. Matatalo ko sila sa Atari at Pac-Man. Anyway, Mr. President, I move that, with the permission of the body, consider proposed Senate Resolution number 265. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection?
Thank you.
Hearing none, consideration measure is in order.
May I ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure, Mr. President?
Secretary will read the title of the measure and insert into the records the text of the said resolution.
Resolution commending and congratulating the Philippine national team for kickboxing for its sterling performance in the 30th Southeast Asian Games.
Majority Leader.
Ikaw ba mag-sponsor? Ikaw mag-sponsor? Dito, sa kickboxing. Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Christopher Bongo to sponsor the measure.
Senator Christopher Go is recognized.
Mr. President, as an advocate of long-term sports development and chair of the Senate Committee on Sports, I would like to co-sponsor the resolution commending and congratulating the Philippine national team for kickboxing for its sterling performance in the 30th Southeast Asian Games. Lahat po ng atletang Pilipino, saan man sila lumaban, ay nagpamalas ng tapang at galing sa SEA Games na magtatapos ngayong gabi. Ang kanilang nakamit ay tumatak sa puso ng sambayan ng Pilipino at nakakintal na sa kasaysayan ng ating bansa. Bagaman hindi lang ang ating bansa ang kinikilala ng mundo bilang tahanan ng kickboxing, kahanga-hanga naman po ang naging performance ng Philippine team. Patunay ito na kapag may sapat na suporta mula sa pamahalaan at taong bayan, kayang magtagumpay ng atletang Pilipino. Thank you to our athletes. You inspire all of us in government to do more for Philippine sports and for our country in general. I'd like to thank and congratulate the President of the Samahang Kickboxing ng Pilipinas, who is no other than Senator Francis Tol Tolentino. Your leadership and dedication has been instrumental in the victory of our team. At saka yung sapatos ni Senator Tolentino, pang kickboxing, kintab. Anyway, lahat po ng nanalo sa Southeast Asian Games ay bibigyan po ng parangal ng ating mahal na Pangulo. Bibigyan niya ng Presidential Lapu-Lapu Award at separate cash incentives sa lahat ng mga medalists. Lubos po akong natutuwa na naging matagumpay, hindi lamang ang hosting, pati na rin po ang mga atleta ng Pilipinas. Mabuhay po kayong lahat. Salamat po sa inyo. Indeed, thank you.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may also say a few words, Mr. President, being the author of the resolution. Mr. President, in 2007, then City Mayor Abraham Bambol Tolentino, who's now our POC president, founded the Samahan Kickboxing of the Philippines under the presidency of our Senator Francis Tol Tolentino. And we're thankful that in early 2019, the Philippine Olympic Committee made it an associate member. And also, Mr. President, this last 30th Southeast Asian Games, it was chosen to be one of our sports, or one of the sports to be played by our country with other Southeast Asian neighbors. And under the leadership of Senator Tolentino, he drew the master plan and made the initial preparations for the 2019 edition of the regional sports meet among Southeast Asian countries. And with that, Mr. President, they had, after the extensive tryouts, they had chosen those mentioned earlier by yours truly, Ma'am Gina Inyong, Jerry Olsin, Jean-Claude Saclag, Jomar Baligi, Renaline Daquiel, Carol Magide, Rex Delara, Roel Catalan, set up and constituted the 8-man lineup, complemented by Mark Sangyao, Glenn Mondol, and Donnie Geisler as their coaches, and Randy Kaluag as their head coach. And with that, they were able to achieve, Mr. President, 3 golds, 2 silvers, and 1 bronze. That is why in the last few weeks, Senator Tol Tolentino was, like me, stressed to the limit, and we didn't know we didn't know what our outcome would be, whether we'd win golds or not. And he himself, as you can see in the video he sent us, we're training the athletes using the punch mitts. Makita natin kung gaano kagaling na trainer si Francis Tolentino. And with that, Mr. President, truly, kickboxing deserves these accolades for its sterling performance in the 30th Southeast Asian Games. With that, Mr. President, there being no other member who wishes to, Mr. President, there's a request from our colleagues here that they all be made co-authors and co-sponsors of the measure. If there's no objection, Mr. President.
All right, we will place that on record if there's no objection from the main sponsors.
Mr. President, there's no member who wishes to interpolate the measure. Move to close the period of interpolation.
Hearing no objection, period of interpolation is closed.
Mr. President, also that there being no members who want to propose any amendments, I move to close the period of amendments.
Hearing no objection, period of amendments is closed.
I move that we adopt, Mr. President, Senate Resolution number 265, subject to style, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. PS Resolution 265 is hereby adopted, subject to style.
May we ask, Mr. President, if the Secretariat is ready with the parchment papers? They're ready?
Yes, they are.
So may we ask for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Congratulations. I think we'll be busy next week.
Pero walang iaabot. Oo nga, picture lang. Suspended naman. Sabi mo, pumila na rin sila.
You know, every NSA was so pressured. After all, but the other sports. Grabe. Extraterritoriality has been broadened like anything. Basahin ko lang gusto.
Tingnan mo kung susceptible to that kind of interpretation.
Session. Oh.
Ready to issue, Mr. President?
Session resumed.
Mr. President,
Jordi.
I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order, Senate Bill number 1224. I so move.
1224.
1224. That's Committee Report
1224.
number 27.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1224.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we ask the Secretary to read the title of the...
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 1224, an act institutionalizing comprehensive values education in the K-12 curriculum as a core subject including good manners and right conduct and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, to sponsor the measure.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my esteemed fellow senators, good afternoon to you all. Dear colleagues, the legislation I'm sponsoring today begs us to answer an important question. What is the most important thing we must teach our children? People in highly technical professions, such as engineers and doctors, might answer mathematics and science. Creative-minded individuals, such as actors, authors, and painters, might answer humanities and the arts. Our talented crop of national athletes who have brought glory and honor to our country during the 2019 SEA Games might answer physical education. Indeed, I think most people would probably answer this question based on their own personal preferences or interests. Personally, I think that science, humanities, the arts, and physical education are all important subjects to teach our children, and they play a crucial role in our basic education curriculum. However, important as they may be, these subjects are not the most important. Before they reach success and acclaim in the scientific world, future scientists must first be taught to use their deep understanding of complex laws of nature for the advancement of the common good. Before they create their masterpieces on human condition, future artists must first be taught how to persevere with honor and dignity through the failures and rejections they will surely face before their art is finally recognized. Before they bring home the gold to the Filipino nation, future athletes must first be taught the value of sportsmanship and camaraderie with their fellow athletes. Mr. President, the most important thing we must teach our children is to hold in their hearts and minds the proper moral, spiritual, ethical, intellectual, and social values they need to develop into upstanding, productive, and fulfilled members of our society. This is the subject of the present legislation. Senate Bill number 1224, or the Comprehensive Values Education Act, seeks to establish values education as an integral and essential part of the K-12 curriculum. A broad, all-encompassing approach will be adopted, seeking to inculcate fundamental tenets such as the observance of respect for oneself and all persons, intercultural and interreligious diversity, gender equity, environmental responsibility, peace and justice, nationalism and global citizenship, as well as the values of patience, perseverance, industry, honesty, integrity, and good faith in dealing with fellow human beings. This bill seeks to improve upon the Department of Education's existing Edukasyon sa Pagpapakatao program and close some of the gaps found during our public hearings and consultations on the subject. I will discuss briefly how these gaps will be bridged by this measure. First, the amount of time currently dedicated to values education in schools has been found to be lacking. the 30-minute daily sessions in primary education, and the 2 one-hour sessions twice a week in secondary education do not provide enough time for teachers to engage students in meaningful discussions and exercises on values formation. Therefore, the bill converts values education into a core subject of the K-12 curriculum, mandating it to be taught in 5 one-hour sessions per week, covering grade 1 all the way up to senior high school. The bill also puts special emphasis on teaching good manners and right conduct, or GMRC. This will provide significant practical learnings to students about the proper way to conduct themselves according to universally accepted modes of behavior, with a special emphasis on treating every person with which they interact with the proper courtesy and respect deserved by all human beings. As the popular saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. With this in mind, the bill mandates the use of the whole school approach in teaching values education and GMRC. Values education teachers will work hand in hand with teachers of other core subjects to ensure that learnings on values that are applicable to their respective academic subjects will be integrated and properly inculcated to students. Non-teaching personnel and other members of school communities, most especially the parents, will also be closely involved in values education. It is an inclusive approach that will maximize the nurturing influences around our students to really ingrain within them the values being taught. Often, the best way to teach values is to put those values into action. After all, values education and GMRC involve such practical soft skills that they require real-life application to be understood as fully as possible. Therefore, this bill mandates the values education curriculum to include clear, distinct, specific, and concrete character-building activities for students. This will allow students to gain pivotal real-life experiences in applying their values to difficult situations, but in a controlled environment where experienced educators will help them process the lessons learned in a constructive and nurturing way. Mr. President, at this point, I'd like to thank the main proponents of this legislation, Senator Joel Villanueva, Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, and as well as Senator Lacson Binay Villar, for their keen insights and close collaboration in drafting this important measure. As chairman of the Senate Committee on Basic Education, Arts, and Culture, I see comprehensive values education, including the teaching of GMRC, as an essential but often neglected part of the basic education curriculum. Thankfully, this bill is poised to bring values education back to the forefront of our schools. All in all, the passage of this legislation is vital to developing and nurturing future generation of respect, morally upright, and compassionate Filipino citizens and leaders. Therefore, Mr. President, on behalf of its authors and co-sponsors, namely again, Senator Joel Villanueva, Senator Miguel Zubiri, and Senator Ping Lacson, I humbly seek the support of this distinguished chamber for the approval of the Comprehensive Values Education Act. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'll sponsor also. You want to go ahead? Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'll also co-sponsor the measure, being the principal author. Mr. President, if I may be allowed, Mr. President, to sponsor.
Yes, Senator Zubiri.
Thank you.
Yeah, Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. President, the school is our children's second home. It is where they spend most of their time, and it is the place that shapes who they will grow up to be. This being the case, it is absolutely necessary that our schools have values education curriculum that will instill in our children foundational Filipino principles. It is useless for our kids to be experts in their multiplication tables, their animal kingdoms, their adverbs, but then also clueless when it comes to simpler but arguably more important things like saying po, opo, or cleaning up after themselves, or volunteering to help their parents out with simple household chores. The academic learning of our children needs to be strongly anchored on values education curriculum that will help them grow into respectful and principled young citizens who have a strong sense of family, community, and responsibility. At present, character-building facet of our education system falls entirely on values education subject, which is taught from K to 3 and then integrated in all subjects from grade 4 to 12. This is simply not enough. This bill, the Comprehensive Values Education Act, will reinstate the values education classes as a core subject, taught at least 1 hour a day for 5 days a week. This bill will also see the return of GMRC, Good Manners and Right Conduct, in our schools, Mr. President, which, by the way, many, many years ago, or at least 2 decades ago, was a norm in our educational facilities. Strengthened values education programs ensure that our children receive proper support and guidance, especially as they head into the tumultuous stage of adolescence. Our children, Mr. President, are growing up in an increasingly borderless world where technology, particularly social media, has, for better or for worse, really altered the way that they understand the world. It has also altered the way that they interact with other people. While technology is a wonderful tool for learning, it can also be limiting. Our kids cannot learn such things as respect, compassion, and discipline online. Values education remains the domain of the family and the school. This is why we cannot afford to do away with it or even reduce it. A strong values education program will provide our children a solid foundation that will brace them for the particular challenges of this globalizing age. With comprehensive values education subject, our children will learn to process value positions and value judgment and adapt accordingly in a given situation. They will learn to interact with others, especially with their peers, parents, and elderly, with respect, cultural, religious, gender, and gender sensitivity, and along with other universal values. They will be able to develop a stable sense of self that will stand strong against the less desirable influences of this changing world. Mr. President, one thing that stands out among Filipino values is how we love, respect, and take care of our parents and elderly when they grow old. We can never be equal with that, or rather, we can never be equal with what our parents have done to us. But what kind of love and care they gave us when we were young, or the kind of love and care they gave us when we were young. But taking care of them when they grow old or sick is one way to show our appreciation for all their sacrifices when they were raising us up. This Filipino value is something wanting in many developed societies. This, I believe, is our edge among these societies and countries, and I don't want this to be forgotten by our youth today. However, there are other values that we can emulate from other countries. In my visits to Japan, I'm amazed how the school children carry themselves. For instance, while watching a game, they will cheer loudly and act like excited young kids that they are, but after the game, they turn into small adults, taking the time to clean up their trash and leave the venue tidier than when they arrived and used it. Compare that to what we see here, even adults lack the discipline it takes to keep their surroundings clean. It is evident that we need this good conduct, good manners, and right conduct so that we can continue these simple Filipino values, Mr. President, that we sorely miss in today's youth. Not everyone, Mr. President, to be honest, have the same value system that we had in the past. Truly, there is a gap in our values education program. We cannot have a shortened period of values education where we simply tell our children what to do. If we expect them to follow the unwritten rules of life, we must expand our values education program and take time to explain to them why these rules exist, why we should all follow them as well. We must instill in them a sense of consequence and responsibility. Children are the most vulnerable group in society, and it is our responsibility to help them with proper protection and guidance in their homes and in their schools, Mr. President. This new comprehensive values education program will be a major step in fulfilling that responsibility. As such, I ask our colleagues to see and help us pass this measure the soonest. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President. Mr. President, we'd also like to recognize our distinguished colleague from Bulacan, Senator Joel Villanueva.
Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. At the onset, may I be allowed to thank our distinguished chairperson of the Committee on Basic Education for bringing this to our attention here in the plenary. And we really appreciate his magnanimous and passionate intention to pass this measure. Mr. President, the context that gave birth to our proposed Comprehensive Values Education Bill is the clamor for the revival of good manners and right conduct, or GMRC. The clamor is not based on pedagogical needs, but on rampant social scandals and the corresponding moral outrage that results thereupon. Many of our citizens are appalled with the manner we conduct the different aspects of our everyday affairs. Corruption and lack of discipline is extensive from our traffic to our waste disposal, from our social media to our private social networks, from private corporate business to our public institutions. This has already been the case since September of 1987, when the former Senator Leticia Ramos-Shahani filed a resolution urging the Senate to study the strengths and weaknesses of the Filipino character on the premise of identifying positive qualities for nation building. That initiative produced a report prepared by a distinguished group of Filipino scholars from Senator Gordon's University, Ateneo, and the University of the Philippines, and was completed in early 1990s. This report recommended that in order to fully utilize the good qualities of our people, the weaknesses or negative qualities must be removed or rectified. It has been the groundwork for the nationwide Moral Recovery Program, which sought to integrate ethical values into nation building and government. The then Senate Moral Recovery Program was a major facet of the Ramos administration. It is the same moral recovery program that cascaded into the present DepEd's Values Education Program, or Edukasyon sa Pagpapakatao. 3 decades has gone, and our context has changed. And yet, the same clamor for moral recovery remains, albeit amidst greater challenges and more pressing needs. It is as relevant as it is more urgent today than it was more than 30 years ago, to reassess Filipino values amidst the 21st century and the advent of the 4th Industrial Revolution. As the Filipino People's Senate, Mr. President and esteemed colleagues, we are keen on joining and responding to the ever more urgent clamor for positive change by legislating GMRC inclusion into the curriculum, while at the same time giving rightful recognition for the noble accomplishments of our magnanimous predecessors. We also praise and consider DepEd's hard work for the establishment of the already existing values education framework in the K-12 curriculum. At bagamat po, sang-ayon tayo sa DepEd na hindi naman nawawala ang GMRC sa curriculum, at makikita pa rin po ito sa kasalukuyang edukasyon sa pagpapakatao o ESP subject, kailangan po nating harapin ang katotohanan na napag-iwanan na talaga ang GMRC. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we hope to educate the whole authentic human person, educating the youth in the free understanding, desiring and owning of actions proper to human person is the greatest and noblest, yet but only one aspect of values education. GMRC is the aspect of the comprehensive values education where learners are given the chance to know the what and the how of the acceptable manners of conducting daily affairs according to the universal norms of ethics and morality. Like, for example, proper way of dressing, of dining, walking, speaking, among many other things in the different situations and dimensions of life. Character building activities will provide learners with actual opportunities to practice, to experience, test, and deepen whatever is taught and caught in the other aspects of the comprehensive values education. Napakabilis din po ng pagbabago ng panahon dahil na rin sa pag-unlad ng teknolohiya. Napakalaki po ng impluensya ng social media at kalimitan ay magkaiba ang itinuturo sa classroom sa nakikita sa labas ng paaralan. It is for this reason that the Comprehensive Values Education Bill is anchored in whole school approach through classroom teaching, co-curricular activities, and through community linkages. Marami po ang nagsasabing hindi pinagpalang subject ang values education. Hindi raw ito katulad ng math, science, at English na prioridad sa ating mga eskwelahan. Dahil dito sadyang kulang na kulang po ang 30 minutes kada isang araw para sa ating mga elementarya at 120 minutes naman kada isang linggo sa sekundarya para sa values education. Mr. President, what can you accomplish in 30 minutes? Experience-wise, valuing process within a 30-minute period is not feasible because that is the time that the advisor or homeroom teacher will lecture or make students do other jobs like cleaning, etc. Hence, our Comprehensive Values Education Bill seeks to institute values education as a core subject in the K-12 program curriculum whereby GMRC is to be integrated and is to be taught for at least an hour every school day. Kaugnay po nito, magtatakda rin po ng mga pamamaraan para maengganyo ang ating mga kabataan kumuha ng values education teaching bilang specialization sa ating mga teacher training institutions dahil nga po paunti na ng paunti ang mga kabataan na interesado sa values education ngayon. Mr. President, we expect DepEd to put more value to values education. We want to have a well-grounded grasp of reality, of the right connections of things, of right reasons and motives for doing things right. Unfortunately, there seems a tendency to choose between GMRC and values education. Mr. President, we do not want to make that mistake. It is the right thing to revive GMRC as essential part of values education framework because GMRC is an essential aspect of values education. Let me stress, Mr. President, that GMRC without values education will make robots of people programmed and disciplined into doing the arbitrary social conducts of good manners and right conduct, bereft of the capacity to discern, will, and act in freedom on what is good and what is right. Finally, Mr. President, our Comprehensive Values Education Bill is rooted on the claim that values education is a primordial priority of our 1987 Constitution. It is the manifest intent of the Constitution to develop an enlightened, nationalistic, creative, productive, and disciplined citizenry with strong ethical and spiritual values. It calls educators to consider values education as an integral part of the curriculum. Mr. President, what else is education, if not a bringing out the best that a human person can become? And what can it be if not pagpapakatao, if not values education? The Comprehensive Values Education Bill aims at helping our people, especially the young, to always do the right things in the right manners for the right reasons. It is our long overdue mandate to legislate into law the integration of comprehensive values education into our educational system. May I also add that the Pambansang Samahan para sa Edukasyon sa Pagpapahalaga, Incorporated, issued a resolution of support to this measure, and they are looking forward to the approval and passing into law of this bill. Again, Mr. President, I want to reiterate my utmost thanks to the esteemed chairman of the Senate Committee of Basic Education, Senator Win Gatchalian, for prioritizing this measure. Alam ko pong napakalaking sakripisyo para sa kanya ang hindi mag-date, hindi lumabas para asikasuhin ang panukalang batas na ito. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, it becomes more urgent that comprehensive values education be part of the K-12 curriculum in the advent of the 21st century and fourth industrial revolution. It is in the light of the foregoing that the immediate enactment of this bill into law is earnestly sought. Muli po, Ginoong Pangulo, maraming salamat at pagpalain tayong lahat ng ating Panginoong Diyos.
Senator Bong Revilla is recognized.
Mr. President, may I manifest that I wish to be co-sponsor of Senate Bill number 1224 under Committee Report 27. I will just submit my co-sponsor speech to be inserted into the record, Mr. President.
Yes, we'll place that on record. Senator Richard Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to manifest my support of this wonderful bill, Mr. President, which should have been done a long, long time ago, and I congratulate our colleague, Senator Gatchalian, alas Senator Villanueva, from the University of Santo Tomas. And also Senator Subiri and all of you. You all look like you're all value-oriented. Look only. And that is why it is important, Your Honor, levity aside, that we live by our values and our code. I was just having a little conversation with the two ladies here who are continuing the conversation without me. And we were talking about the Japanese, and I learned something right away from the Honorable Cynthia Villar, who spoke right away about the Japanese manners, about how they bow all the time, cleanliness, honesty. You know, Your Honor, even all our activities as young people seem to have lost their esteem. The Boy Scouts taught us all these things as well. The Girl Scouts also taught us this one. And it seems through the years you can even see the relegation, and I hope I'm not criticizing anybody here, but in the time that we were in grade school and high school, when you joined the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, especially for the women, they would come in perfect uniform, with the lanyard, with the whistle, shine belts. You know, it takes a lot to really formulate the character. We are all trying to define ourselves in this country. And that's why when I first became mayor of Olongapo, one of my first words is, what this country needs is not just a change of men, but a change in men. And precisely, Mr. President, we have to reinvent ourselves. Our attitudes, our ambitions will only be realized if we devote ourselves to the value of hard work. And to my mind, Mr. President, we have lost that, perhaps because we've become sarcastic to ourselves. It seems that there is less belief in our capabilities. And, you know, Mr. President, it cannot just be taught. And I support certainly this law because I am told that what is being taught right now is 30 minutes a day and in the grade school, and 1 hour twice a week. And, Mr. President, I don't think you can actually teach it, but certainly we would need better teachers to really espouse all these values. And there's nothing better than leading by example, Mr. President. In the old days, Mr. President, not too long ago, we used to have to recite Florante at Laura. And although even in those days, there was a lot of gimmickry and foolishness when we recited, ang laki sa layo karineo hubad, sa bait at ngunit sa hatol ay salat. They would say that. And we would remember all these lines. And this stayed with us. And I'm sure Senator Soto was also filled with this education in San Juan de Letran, where I attended grade school as well. And this permeated the being of the people at that time, the young people. The parents participated, obviously. And that is why today, ang nakikita po natin ngayon, kung minsan nagpa-participate sa mga parents, pero pagka yung mga bata ay naando sa batingting, yung tinatawag nating mga banda ng mga bata, and really, what is more important is not the form, but the substance. Mr. President, everywhere I go, and I just came from Geneva, one of the most exciting things that I've seen, and it's an experience for me, is to see the pride of the Filipino tight in Geneva. Walang tamad. Hindi one tamad. And you know, Mr. President, you had a couple of guys there, young boys, who are now in Geneva University studying medicine, and they only take 250, and two of those were from the Philippines. And they still spoke the language, Mr. President, in spite of the fact that after the awarding, they would speak to each other in French. And this went on for all the others in Geneva, perhaps because of the fact that they're away from home. There is more imperativeness, if you will, that the families get tighter, and what keeps the family tight? Values. So, Your Honor, I totally support this. I have lived my life, as far as I'm concerned, with philosophies. That's why I've said most of the time, to get everybody in together, again, going back to my experience in Allowable, and I had a very wonderful experience there, we said all together now, a value of unity, Mr. President. And at the same time, ambition, aim high. These are things that are taught to us even in our school, in altum vola, fly high, Mr. President. Not in basketball alone, but in the virtues and the values that we need to possess. There was also, of course, many others, such as trying to extricate the superstition sometimes that are taught us in religion, or for that matter, by the colonials in the past, or I don't know if it was really the Spanish, I don't want to be unfair, where we were told one tamad, or for that matter, there was even some thought about we becoming ladrones, when in fact it was Magellan's expedition who lost their valuables when they passed by the island of Guam, and they then called it Ladrones Islands, Mr. President. Having said that, Mr. President, this is an idea that should have stayed with us forever. That the value of work ethic, in Japan, Mr. President, in the winter time before the war, and I read this in John Toland's book, children would go to school bareback during the winter. And they would go out, Mr. President, and clean up everywhere. Because to my mind, and to their minds, it is important that the Japanese, which is separated from the Asian mainland, like we are, an island country, would always be threatened by big neighbors. And the only way they could keep themselves together is the homogeneity of the islands. That is why we laugh at them that they don't speak good English, and we pride ourselves in being able to speak the King's English, or Arneo English as they call it derisively. But in Japan, they stuck to their language. And sometimes they have a value called tate mae. You're talking to them and they're expressionless, but they're polite. And when it's time for them to go honne, which is to show their true character, they remove the tate mae and show by their actions the kind of person or the kind of Japanese persona that they are, Mr. President. So, again, going to another country like Singapore, a small city-state, Mr. President, everywhere it is imbibed there the value of unity, solidarity, and certainly transformation. That countries must remain in the pursuit, a heuristic notion towards transformation. Something that we seem to forget, and sometimes because of our form orientation, we want to win the game all the time, but we don't want to put investments in our winning the game. The Asian Games, Southeast Asian Games is a very good example. We're at home, we have the home crowd, and it's expected that we would win. But then, even before the games are over tonight, I already read statements, it's going to be hard to make it in the next Asian Games. In the next 2 Asian Games, you'll be lucky to get 3 or 4. Why is that, Your Honor? It is because sometimes our values perhaps teach us na magpakumbaba o pagbigyan yung host natin, or I don't know whether that would be considered something that I think that we should take a look at. And that is why it is also important that there is always somebody a group that would always have a think tank that would think about our country in the way we try to espouse the value of having the idea that we must be united in our ambition. There must be a great work ethic. And as I always say in Chinese, bo choy kang, bo tan siya. You don't work, you don't eat. And therefore, Mr. President, to my mind, I am very, very proud that Senator Gatchalian has sponsored this, and Senator Gatchalian passed it to committee, and Senator Villanueva sponsored this bill, because I think it is important that we understand this and we realize this. So let us reinvent ourselves, let us fine-tune ourselves, and get into the habit of making sure that we're conscious that, we're told God is looking at us, but we don't really believe that. We still keep doing things in our own way. But the important thing is we are always looking and redefining ourselves. Looking at the mirror, we can lie to everybody, but we cannot lie to ourselves. And the bottom line is, you cannot do that if you are, as they say in Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. And if we're not true to ourselves, we're just fooling ourselves. We're just mere travelers in this world without any idea, without any hope that we can be a better people, 1,000 times greater than what we are, and certainly provide ourselves with the greatest, not posture, but the greatest acts of dignity, of courage, of hard work that will gain the respect, not only of ourselves, that's the most important part, but of the whole world. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and congratulations to both senators and to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
We thank the support of Senator Richard Gordon as well. Mr. President, Senator Binay requested her co-sponsorship speech on the Good Manners and Right Conduct Bill be inserted into the records. I so move.
We'll place it in record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that, I move to suspend consideration of the measure to allow us. Can we, of course, as members, as a principal author, Mr. President, several of our colleagues here would wish to be co-authors. Senator Julon would like to be co-author. Maybe all members present, Mr. President, if there's no objection, all members present today be made co-sponsors and co-authors.
Again, we place that on record.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration of the measure. Allow our colleagues.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration measure suspended.
Mr. President, we're in receipt of the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provision votes on House Bill number 4228. This is the General Appropriations Act for 2020. I move to consider the said bicameral committee report, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is in order.
Mr. President, I move to recognize the chairperson of the Senate panel, Senator Sonny Angara of Aurora, to sponsor the bicameral conference committee report.
The gentleman from Aurora, Senator Juan Edgardo Agara, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader, dear colleagues. I'm happy to report that the Senate and House panels met this morning and agreed on the BICAM report. And for brevity, I think the House has already ratified. I'd like to move that the joint explanatory note on the bicameral conference committee report be read into the record, Mr. President.
What does the Majority Leader
Yes,
say?
Mr. President, I join our good colleague.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, with that, I move to adopt and ratify the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing votes on House Bill number 4228 and consider the report of the Senate panel as inserted into the records of the Senate. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. House Bill 4228's bicameral conference committee report is hereby adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say thanks to our colleagues for their very significant and important help, particularly our vice chairs and our members, but also to thank the Senate staffs, particularly the LBMRO headed by Attorney Doblon, because they, maybe not many know, although the Senate was not in session last week, they were here every day, stayed late nights, came in early mornings, and for 2 straight weekends po, napuyat po yan. If they were not working here in the Senate, nagpupuyat po sila sa House of Representatives po. So big thanks to all of them. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, indeed, our gratitude.
Sabi nga ni Mr. President, sabi ni Senator Nancy Binay, para raw silang mga bata ni Herman Moreno na walang tulugan. Talagang walang tulugan. I was actually here last night for the party of the media, and I walked into the office of Senator Angara because I saw some lights on, and they were still working overtime, Mr. President. We really must commend the staff of the Finance Committee for such a job well done, Mr. President. And of course, Attorney Doblon, the 25th Senator of the Senate. She's the most important senator, I think. Yes, Mr. President. Oh, she's not allowed to retire, Mr. Minority Floor Leader. Yes, she's not. She's a foundation. Haligi ng Senado yan. Yes, she's, according to Senator Risa, she has an over-security of tenure.
All
We will
right,
make sure she's well protected.
In that case, if Attorney Doblon decides to retire, we will put her in jail.
Senator Gordon will have her detained downstairs. Yes, Mr. President.
President, this morning, if I may, I already had a picture taken with her to make sure she is imprinted in my heart forever.
Again, our thanks to LBRMO, headed by Attorney Doblon.
Yes, a
and,
job well done to them,
The
sir.
Committee on Finance, headed by Senator.
And Senator Angara as well, Mr. President. You know, his amiable character made all this happen, Mr. President, without any delays and difficulties. Mr. President, Senator Recto also sent me a message that he will, if it's possible, that he'll insert his co-sponsorship speech for, oh, I'm sorry, this is for the GMRC bill. I'm sorry.
All right. Place on record.
I thought it was for the finance. Anyway, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we'll continue with sponsorship measures. There's 3 more measures to sponsor. I move to transfer, Mr. President, to the transfer from the calendar of
For ordinary
business to special order, Senate Bill number 1211, Mr. President. I so move.
1211. Any objection? Hearing none. So transferred.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1211. And ask
Any
the Secretary to
objection?
read the
Hearing
title.
none. Consideration is in orders.
Senate Bill number 1211, an act amending Republic Act number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code of 1991, by expanding the scope of local government units' powers over local public transportation systems and for other purposes.
Majority Leader. Senator Tolentino is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Mr. President,
Chairman of the Committee on Local Government.
Mr. President, as Chairman of the Senate Committee on Local Government, and together with my co-sponsor, Senator Ralph Recto, I have the honor to sponsor Senate Bill 1211 entitled an act amending the Local Government Code of 1991 by expanding the scope of the local government units' powers over local public transportation systems and for other purposes. Mr. President, this representation has the privilege of serving as Mayor of Tagaytay City for several terms, as well as Chairman of the Metropolitan Development Authority for many years. I know transportation and traffic problems by heart. It's no stranger to me, and I know the efforts being done by the national government agencies, which are commendable. But the reality is, with the current state of things, they are still wanting, Mr. President, due to the complexity of this problem. As described by Mr. Jean Paul Rodriguez, author of the Geography of Transport Systems, cities are, and I quote, cities are complex spatial structures supported by complex infrastructure, including transport systems. The city, the larger a city, the greater the complexity and the potential for disruptions, particularly when the complexity is not efficiently managed. Mr. President, urban productivity is highly dependent on the efficiency of its transport system to move labor, consumers, and freight between multiple origins and destinations. According to the 2002 Urban Strategy Review by the World Bank entitled Cities on the Move, deteriorating transport conditions associated with urban sprawl and increased motorization are damaging the economy of large cities, and this includes our very own cities here in the Philippines. This has to change. I have always been advocating that some national problems require local solutions, and I believe this is one of those instances. But what problems are hindering our local governments from helping solve this problem? Number one, funding. For local government, for LGUs, LGU-led projects has not been given priority. In the government's current public-private partnership initiative, of the projects currently under implementation, only one LGU is listed, has been listed, and this is the municipality of Calibo in Aklan, which, however, is not a transportation-related initiative, but only for the rehabilitation of its slaughterhouse, Mr. President. Of the projects in the pipeline, there are 13 LGU-led projects. However, the projects that are closest to solving our transportation problem only involved no-contact apprehension projects and pay parking buildings. As it stands today, there are no hard infrastructure projects planned for transportation through the PPP initiative. Number two, LGUs have limited access to sources of financing for infrastructure projects. Despite being granted local and fiscal autonomy by Article 10 of the Constitution, our LGUs are currently prohibited from acquiring loans from foreign sources. As an exemption, they are allowed to secure loans from multilateral financing institutions like the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. However, with the stringent requirements the government requires for an LGU to avail of this facility, no LGU has availed of this facility as I speak. The local government code, however, allows local government to secure loans from domestic sources under Section 297, and I quote, "A local government unit may contract loans, credits, and other forms of indebtedness with any government or domestic private institution and other lending institution to finance the construction, installation, improvement, expansion, operation, and maintenance of public facilities, infrastructure facilities, housing projects, acquisition of real property, and the implementation of other capital investment projects subject to such terms and conditions as may be agreed upon by the local government unit and the lender." However, even for local sources, there are still layers and layers of approval required from national agencies like the Bureau of Local Government Finance and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Number three, the process to have a project approved by the national government is just too tedious. As the rules stand today, local PPP and BOT, the Build, Operate, and Transfer, under Republic Act 6957, amended by Republic Act 7718, more commonly known as the BOT law, projects that cost below 200 million only require approval from the LGU Sangguniang. However, beyond this, the amount of 200 million NEDA approval is already required. Under the NEDA's Manual for Approval of the Investment Coordination Committee, the ICC, a project has to go through and secure the approval of the ICC Secretariat, the ICC Technical Board, then the ICC Cabinet Committee, and finally the NEDA Board, before the government finally gives its imprimatur or endorsement for the project. This process, while prudent, does not really go well with the nature of our LGUs, whose officers have only a short term of 3 years. By the time the project is approved, the LGU may have a new leader who, for one reason or another, would not want to continue with the project, Mr. President. In the light of these realities, it is the view of the committee that it is now crucial to turbocharge the functions and capabilities of the LGUs in addressing road congestion and creating balanced transport systems. Notably, LGUs not only possess a mastery of their own mobility demands, but institutional memory of local policies addressing local transport problems as within their jurisdiction. As I speak, Mr. President, ang laman lang po ng local government code tungkol sa kapangyarihan ng mga LGUs ay tungkol sa pagbibigay ng prangkisa ng tricycle. This is a fundamental responsibility. Transport planning is part of urban planning and is an integral part of urban design. This is a fundamental responsibility of the LGU, which no government agency or foreign institution can usurp. No other government body is more empowered and equipped to tackle the traffic crisis than the LGU, which is endowed with all the powers under the local government code, among them the power of eminent domain. The territorial footprint of transportation is significant, since between 30 and 60% of a metropolitan area may be devoted to transportation, particularly for the automobile. Cities are important generators, likewise, and attractors of mobility, which is associated with geographical paradoxes that are self-reinforcing. For example, economic specialization leads to additional transport demands, while agglomeration leads to congestion. The local government units are the ones which experience this dilemma firsthand, so they are likewise in the best position and with the powers to resolve the crisis. For instance, Mr. President, the city of Las Piñas, where Senator Villar is a resident, has been doing a lot of innovations in terms of opening private subdivisions, connecting roads, connecting the national highways of Cavite with the roads of Metro Manila. This bill, Senate Bill 1211, or the LGU Transportation Act, finally clarifies the mandates of the LGUs under the Local Government Code and empowers them to solve transportation problems within their jurisdiction as well as those outside through the collaboration with other LGUs as well, Mr. President. Even the Asian Development Bank, in a paper published April 2012 by Priyanka Suud entitled Subnational Finance for Infrastructure, Potential Roles and Opportunities for ADB, has recognized the growing need for financing at the subnational level in view of the current thrust of divesting responsibilities and services to the subnational or local government. A good example, Mr. President, and we've been hearing the country Japan a few moments ago. A good example, Mr. President, is the endeavor of Tama Garden City Development Project in Japan. It is a perfect model for integrated land use and transport development. They transformed a 5,000-hectare city and constructed a railway of 22 kilometers with zero subsidy from the central government, but rather financed by commercial loans and the Japan Development Bank. Among the key features of this project was the use of, quote-unquote, land readjustment. In this scheme, instead of purchasing the land for transportation requirements, the landowners formed a cooperative that consolidated the properties without transferring ownership. After the construction of the transport systems, smaller but fully serviced parcels were returned to the landowners. Hinati po uli, Mr. President. This is a prime example of the need to give the LGUs who have the power and responsibility for urban planning, land use, and zoning, the power to create transportation systems, as well as the power to find the necessary funding. On a brighter side, Mr. President, existing policies of the government have already started the initiative of empowering LGUs to implement their own infrastructure projects. With the implementation of NEDA's guidebook on joint ventures for LGUs, LGUs now can enter into joint ventures independently of the national government. Makati has led the way, as I speak, with a $3.5 billion subway project with 10 stations within Makati alone, without any subsidy nor sovereign guarantee from the national government. The city has been and will be in coordination with the Department of Transportation and other local government units to ensure interconnectivity with existing and future transport systems like the LRT, MRT, as well as the Pasig River Ferry System. The Pasig River Ferry System, for instance, Mr. President, was aided during its relaunch 48 hours ago by the city of Pasig. Pasig City donated 2 ferry boats to enable the Pasig River Ferry System to be resuscitated and relaunched, Mr. President. And the city of Manila promised another 2 ferry boats. Makati is about to start the construction by the end of this year, the subway project. Then the project will be finished by 2024, serving 700,000 passengers daily. Manila will soon follow suit with its own tram and monorail, studying 2 unsolicited proposals regarding the construction of said systems within the city. During our committee hearings, representatives from these cities and other cities expressed that indeed they are unsure as to whether they are truly empowered to create transport systems under the local government code, since the local government code is silent on the matter. This remains to be a gray area. However, when passed, this bill will further strengthen and cement the initiative of our government to provide true autonomy to our local government units. Once and for all, we inform and clarify our LGUs that indeed they have the power to solve their own problems. With these measures in place to promote cooperation and interconnectivity with the national and other local transport projects, LGUs may finally, including Cebu, speedily and effectively answer all these century-old problems of simply moving from point A to point B. In view of this, Mr. President, I humbly seek the approval of this chamber. I humbly seek the approval of this chamber for Senate Bill 1211. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to allow our colleagues to study the measure further, I move to suspend consideration of the same.
Any objection? Approved.
Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order Senate Bill number 810 under Committee Report number 24.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, I move to consider Senate Bill number 810.
Hearing no objection, consideration is in order.
Mr. President, I move to ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 810, an act increasing the authorized expenses of candidates and political parties, amending for the purpose Section 13 of Republic Act number 7166, entitled An Act Providing for Synchronized National and Local Elections and for Electoral Reforms, authorizing appropriations therefor and for other purposes.
Mr. President, may we recognize the sponsor, Senator Amy Marcos, to sponsor the measure.
Senator Amy Marcos is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Majority Floor Leader, esteemed colleagues of the Philippine Senate. Fiction, it has been said, is the lie through which we tell the truth. Put another way, for truth to triumph over chaos, we write fiction. Surely the much obscured chaos of our sources, those statements of contribution and expenditures, which we dutifully submit after every campaign, have become little more than the work of skillful fiction. As we know too well, today's current ceiling of allowable spending per registered voter is 10 pesos for president and vice president, 3 pesos per registered voter for other candidates, including senators, provided they belong to political parties, 5 pesos per registered voter for independent candidates, and 5 pesos per registered voter for other political parties. At these obsolete rates, it is hardly surprising that it is said campaign expenses have become totally fictionalized. Today, I submit Committee Report number 24, sponsoring therewith Senate Bill 810, entitled An Act Increasing Authorized Expenses of Candidates and Political Parties, amending for this purpose Section 13 of Republic Act 7166, entitled An Act Providing for Synchronized National and Local Elections and for Electoral Reforms, authorizing appropriations therefor and for other purposes. It has, in fact, been 28 years since the thresholds limiting the expenses of candidates and political parties were set in 1991 by RA 7166, and we seem to remain hopelessly stuck at the same 3 peso level since, despite inflation and a 368.1% increase in the country's overall consumer price index after almost 3 decades. Each one of us has struggled to limit election expenses within the archaic limits set as if by stone by this law. Consider the governor of Batanes' plight. With only 12,204 registered voters, her provincial candidates are allowed, together with her, to spend a total of 36,612 pesos if fortunate enough to be aligned with a political party. If not, they have the princely sum of 61,000 pesos and 20 centavos. Or check out Pateros, the only municipality in the National Capital Region with a mere 35,000 registered voters. Local candidates can spend only 105,000 pesos if a member of a political party, or 175,000 pesos if an independent candidate. This is in a town located cheek by jowl with BGC, with Bonifacio Global Cities, multinational behemoths, and local Taipan's multi-billion headquarters. No wonder that following the 2010 national local elections, there were 887 overspending cases filed before the courts. After 2013, another 933 cases, and every election thereafter. Truth indeed, at least regarding campaign expenses, is a luxury. Fiction, an absolute necessity. Ladies and gentlemen of the August Senate, Our bill merely levels up our electoral budget with inflation and an almost fourfold increase in consumer prices from 1991 to 2018. Thus, this bill raises the authorized aggregate amount for campaign expenditure for candidates and political parties through this manner. For President and Vice President, the 10 pesos for every voter currently registered nationwide is raised to 50 pesos, which will bring it from 50 pesos times 60 million voters roughly to a rather more realistic 3 billion pesos in total. Other candidates with political parties, from a mere 3 pesos, we are raising or recommending that it be raised to 20 pesos. But perhaps there is room to also establish a separate amount for senators who have a constituency of the entire country, because that jacks it up to a huge 1.2 billion. But these are areas for discussion and debate. Meanwhile, independent candidates, I recommend we raise from 5 pesos to 30 pesos, and political parties also from 5 to 30 pesos. Let us be clear, there is no intention in any way to shut out all eligible but less affluent candidates. Instead, we seek to bring reality and market prices to the fiction of campaign finance. To avoid the ludicrous scenarios occurring from the province of Batanes to Pateros, Metro Manila, the bill also seeks to establish a floor spending of at least 500,000 pesos per position. Further, the poorer candidate cannot be disadvantaged if in fact he can generate donations which should rightfully and fairly be tax-free of the donor's tax under the National Internal Revenue Code. Finally, our bill makes election authorities more proactive and efficient in the future. We propose that every 6 years from the effectivity of the Act, the Commission on Election, in conjunction with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the NEDA, the National Economic and Development Authority, the Philippine Statistics Authority, should on their own adjust the amounts of the authorized expenses based on inflation and price indices. Indeed, our bill is a mere part of the ongoing legislative effort to solve and resolve the gargantuan problems of campaign finance. The last Congress signing into law early this year, RA 11207, to increase the discounted rates of political advertisements in TV, radio, and print. Unfortunately, the late promulgation of its IRR rendered it effective only in April of 2019, a month shy of the national and local elections. Sooner rather than later, we hope COMELEC's Campaign Finance Office will be bolstered by permanent manpower and digital material to properly and thoroughly audit all submitted financial documents, rather than relying upon lawyers on detail from various departments and the random hiring of contractuals and casuals whenever their budgets allow. But that long-held dream of campaign finance advocates that one day government provide a financial counterpart to electoral expenses until today remains a fictional pipe dream rather than a reality. As public officials, let us begin to speak the truth indeed, put an end to the fiction, perhaps the hypocrisy of the sources and the campaign finance reports, able to stand and face the scrutiny of public opinion with cogent law and their universal enforcement. More realistic rates for the electoral process mandated by our new law can be the first step toward genuinely free elections. It is said that fiction reveals the truth that reality obscures. Let us put an end to the fiction of election expense limits, and today let us finally lift the obscurity that clouds the reality of truthful and free elections. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Sponsorship na naman. Wala pang debate. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, to allow our colleagues to study the measure further, I move that we suspend consideration of the measure.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we take up additional reference of business so we can take up the other two
There
matters.
is additional reference to business. The Secretary will proceed.
Third additional reference of business, message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 11 December 2019, it adopted House Concurrent Resolution Number 5, titled Concurrent Resolution Granting Consent to His Excellency Raul S. Hernandez, former Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of the Philippines to the Republic of Korea from 28 May 2014 to 30 April 2019, to receive the award of the Order of Diplomatic Service Merit, First Class, from the Government of the Republic of Korea, in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
Senate Number 1225, an act further expanding the coverage of incentives granted to national athletes and coaches, amending for the purpose Section 8 of Republic Act Number 10699, or the National Athletes and Coaches Benefits and Incentives Act, introduced by Senator Angara.
Referred to the Committees on Sports and Finance.
Senate Number 1226, an act authorizing the Department of Health, DOH, to set and approve the bed capacity and service capability of all DOH hospitals, introduced by Senator Go.
Referred to the Committees on Health and Finance.
Senate Number 1227, an act establishing the rental housing subsidy program and providing funds therefore for other purposes, introduced by Senator Go.
Referred to the Committees on Urban Planning and Finance.
Senate Number 1228, an act establishing a mandatory evacuation center in all cities, provinces, and municipalities, appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Go.
Referred to the Committees on National Defense, Public Works, and Finance.
Resolutions. Senate Joint Resolution Number 10, titled Joint Resolution Creating a Congressional Oversight Committee on Education to review and assess Philippine education, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senators Angara, Drilon, Gatchalian, Poe, and Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules.
PS Resolution Number 257, a resolution urging the Senate Committee on Cultural Communities to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation into the displacement of Aitas and other indigenous communities in areas covered by the new Clark City Development Project, introduced by Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committee on Cultural Communities.
PS Resolution Number 259, resolution urging the appropriate Senate committee to inquire in aid of legislation into the water concession agreements of Maynilad and Manila Water with the Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System, MWSS, to determine whether such are onerous and disadvantageous to the government and to safeguard Philippine national interests and the right of all people, introduced by Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Public Services.
PS Resolution Number 260, resolution honoring and commending the Philippine Arnis team for winning 14 gold medals in the 30th Southeast Asian Games, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
To the Committee, Archives, to the Archives.
PS Resolution Number 261, resolution calling for investigation in aid of legislation into the alleged onerous contracts between the Philippine government and water concessionaires Manila Water Company and Maynilad Water Services, Inc., introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
To the Committee on Public Services.
PS Resolution Number 262, resolution urging the proper Senate committee to inquire in aid of legislation into the issuance of EECCs for the construction of coal-fired power plants near environmentally critical areas within Nara, Palawan, and Barangay Tugbo, Mobo, Masbate, introduced by Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Energy and Environment.
Committee reports. Committee Report Number 28, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PS Resolution Number 263, entitled Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on Extradition, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
To the Calendar for Ordinary Business.
Committee Report Number 29, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PS Resolution Number 264, titled Resolution Concurring in the Ratification of the Treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
To the Calendar for Ordinary Business. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to calendar special orders. Committee Report 28 and 29 on the Senate Resolutions Number 263 and 264, respectively. I so
Any
move, Mr. President.
objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution Number 263 and 264 as reported out under Committee Reports 28 and 29. Mr. President, I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, so considered.
We've asked the Secretary, Mr. President, to read the title.
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Proposed Senate Resolution Number 263, resolution concurring in the ratification of the treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on extradition. Proposed Senate Resolution Number 264, resolution concurring in the ratification of the treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters.
Majority Leader.
May we recognize the sponsor, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel, to sponsor the measure. He will be delivering an omnibus speech for both measures, Mr. President. So,
Hearing no objection, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III is recognized to sponsor the two measures.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, pursuant to Section 21, Article 7 of our 1987 Constitution, no treaty or international agreement shall be valid and effective unless concurred in by at least two-thirds of all the members of the Senate. I have the honor to seek this august body's concurrence to the ratification of the following two treaties. Treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on extradition, and the treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters. Mr. President, in this complex and interconnected world that we live in, governments have used various tools of international legal cooperation to combat transnational organized crimes, including those involved in terrorism, illegal sale of weapons, smuggling, money laundering, and trafficking in persons, and illicit drugs. Prosecutors can no longer confine their attention to their own jurisdictions because criminality today does not respect borders. Given the more porous characteristic of our borders, ever-increasing mobility of people, and advancements in technology, criminals have successfully evaded the reach of our laws by coming up with ingenious ways of carrying out their crimes. To combat such efforts, governments supplement domestic legislation by signing treaties and conventions that seek to bolster international cooperation in the areas of criminal prosecution and law enforcement. It is within this context that on November 13, 2017, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed the Treaty on Extradition and the Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation. Please allow me, Mr. President, to explain the nature of the Extradition Treaty as well as the benefits that can be derived from it. Extradition, as defined under Presidential Decree number 1069, or the Philippine Extradition Law, is the removal of an accused from the Philippines with the object of placing him at the disposal of foreign authorities to enable the requesting state or government to hold him in connection with any criminal investigation directed against him or the execution of a penalty imposed on him under the penal or criminal law of the requesting state or government. In other words, extradition is the formal process by which a fugitive of justice is to be returned to the state where the person stands accused or is convicted of one or more criminal offense against the law of the requesting state. Under the Philippine Extradition Law, the extradition of a person found within the country's territory is possible only if the Philippines has an extradition treaty with the requesting state. With respect to the Philippines as the requesting state, the extradition is governed by the provisions of the applicable treaty or convention entered into by the country. The Philippines has extradition treaties with 13 jurisdictions, countries and territories, namely Australia, Canada, China, Hong Kong, SAR, India, Indonesia, South Korea, Micronesia, Spain, Switzerland, Thailand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. This extradition treaty obliges contracting parties to undertake to extradite or surrender to each other, in accordance with treaty provisions, any person who is charged or convicted with an extraditable offense. The treaty has substantially the same standard provisions found in the similar treaties of the Philippines with other countries, and which are already in force, except for two unique provisions. First, expressly providing for the confidentiality of the information pertaining to an extradition request, and second, nationality as a mandatory ground for refusal. Next, Mr. President, is the value and benefits of the other treaty, the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, abbreviated as MLAT or MLAT. It provides party states with a framework for seeking legal assistance in the investigation, prosecution, and punishment of criminal offenses and in legal and judicial proceedings related to criminal matters. The usual basis of mutual legal assistance in criminal matters are treaties. Absent a treaty, assistance by other states is generally limited to service of documents or letters rogatory and can be provided only on the basis of reciprocity and on an ad hoc basis. Thus, MLATs are important because they make assistance compulsory and obligatory. Presently, the Philippines has MLATs with the following countries or territories on a bilateral basis: Australia, China, Hong Kong SAR, South Korea, Spain, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the US. The treaty with the Russian Federation shall be the 9th bilateral MLAT of the Philippines. The scope of legal assistance as defined in the treaty with the Russian Federation includes the service of documents, taking of evidence, including testimony of persons, provision of information, documents, and records, execution of searches and seizures, location and identification of persons and objects, requests for appearances of witnesses, victims, and experts, and the freezing of assets. Given the high incidences and increasing territorial scope of transnational crimes, MLATs have become necessary and vital tools to secure evidence, witnesses, and proceeds of such crimes which are actually beyond our physical and legal jurisdiction. The two treaties submitted for Senate ratification complement and balance each other as both serve as effective tools of international legal cooperation in the prevention and suppression of crimes, especially transnational crimes such as terrorism, drug trafficking, money laundering, and trafficking in persons. Having an extradition treaty with the Russian Federation will allow the Philippines to increase its network of countries that it can request extradition of fugitives, thereby making it difficult for international fugitives to find a safe haven from criminal prosecution or service of sentence. An MLAT with the Russian Federation, on the other hand, will help our two countries obtain a better understanding of each other's legal systems and criminal justice procedures. The MLAT will also be instrumental in, number one, forging better understanding in matters concerning criminal procedure, number two, appreciating investigative techniques, and number three, enhancing law enforcement cooperation between the Philippines and the Russian Federation. The Extradition Treaty and the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, once carried into force, would strengthen our bilateral relations with the Russian Federation, particularly in our common goal of protecting our national security and in strengthening cooperation in combating transnational crime and threats posed by international terrorism. It is worth noting that Russia has already notified the Philippines that both treaties were ratified in Moscow on August 3, 2018. Once these treaties enter into force, the Philippines will also be fulfilling international obligations under the various international legal instruments such as the various UN conventions against terrorism, the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, and the UN Convention Against Corruption. The instrument of ratification of the treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on extradition was signed by President Duterte on September 17, 2019, and was transmitted to the office of the Senate President on the same date. The instrument of ratification of the treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the Russian Federation on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters was signed by President Duterte on September 26, 2019, and was transmitted to the office of the Senate President on the same date. For these reasons, which I have mentioned, Mr. President, I respectfully urge the Senate to concur in the ratification of the Philippines on the treaties on extradition and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters with the Russian Federation. Thank you very much, my dear colleagues.
Majority Leader.
Yeah, Mr. President, I know we can't take this up today because we still need the required two-thirds vote. But just a question, if the good sponsor would just like to answer just one question. This is a shared question between myself and the Minority Floor Leader. Is this treaty the same with the other 8 treaties that we passed? In terms of pro forma, nothing has deviated?
Yes, Mr. President. For extradition, this will be the 14th.
Oh,
For
okay.
MLAT, this will be the 9th. Okay. For MLAT, basically the same. For extradition, I mentioned the 2 new features, which is the confidentiality of the information pertaining to an extradition request. And then the second one is making nationality as a mandatory ground for refusing the extradition request. Meaning, so in reality, the 13 existing extradition treaties, we really keep confidential the request for extradition, but it is not expressly mentioned in the treaty. So the practice of confidentiality is now expressly mentioned in the extradition treaty with Russia. But that is really the practice. The request is kept confidential. And then nationality as a ground for refusing the extradition request means that no Filipino will be extradited by the Philippines to Russia, and in the same manner, no Russian will be extradited by Russia to the Philippines. So we cannot request the extradition of a Russian to the Philippines, and Russia cannot request the extradition of a Filipino to Russia.
The Minority Leader.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. The good sponsor mentioned about 8 MLATs that are already existing. I recall that I negotiated a few of that, particularly that of the United States. But there, as the code sponsor said, there are 2 provisions which are not template provision, as you may want to call it.
In the extradition, sir. In the extradition treaty.
In the other extradition treaty, these 2 are, number 1, confidentiality, number 2, nationality requirement. On the first issue, Mr. President, the Philippines would go to court and ask for an extradition of the person subject of the request. If the request for extradition is confidential, how do you propose to keep that obligation in the face of the transparency provisions of our system? In other words, the court records where the extradition treaty is, where the application of the Department of Justice is made, is a public record. Are we therefore violating the confidentiality clause if these records are revealed because under our system it is a public record?
It's public knowledge. Okay. Yes, Mr. President. Because the confidentiality of the information about the request is maintained up to the point when the Department of Justice decides now to file the petition for extradition before the court. So once it's in the courts, it's public knowledge.
Okay, so yeah, that was not clear.
Yes, so because, sorry about
the
that.
confidentiality is only at the stage when the request is made and up to the Department of Justice, after which, when the extradition request is filed in court, necessarily it can no longer be
Yes,
confidential.
that's correct, Mr. President.
Is that found in the stipulation of the treaty, sir?
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, the other issue is the matter of nationality. In other words, a Filipino who commits, or a Russian, who commits a crime in Russia and is found in the Philippines, the extradition treaty cannot apply.
It can apply. The Philippines can extradite a Russian back to Russia. But if a Filipino commits a crime in Russia and is now found within our territory and Russia requests the extradition of a Filipino, we will not do
All
it.
right, so the other way around is also...
A Russian. A Russian.
Yeah, a Russian commits a crime in Russia.
Here.
Here?
Yes, and then goes back to Russia, and they will not extradite him to the Philippines. And the reason is that it is in their constitution, Mr. President.
It is in their constitution.
It's there.
Because that kind of a stipulation is not found in the other...
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. President.
So this is peculiar because the inability or the inability to extradite is because of the provision of the Russian Constitution.
So by reciprocity, Mr. President, we also now will have to protect our own citizens.
So that reversing the situation, a Filipino who commits a crime in the Philippines and somehow finds himself in Russia, the Philippine authorities cannot have him extradited.
We can.
You can?
Yes, sir, because he's a Filipino.
He's a Filipino. So when will that exclusion apply?
Russia, the principle found in the Constitution is Russia will never extradite its own citizen. So Russian,
Okay, so a Russian who commits a crime in the Philippines
Yes, Your Honor.
goes back to Russia,
Yes.
cannot be extradited.
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
I'll yield the floor to...
By virtue of a constitutional provision of Russia.
with the permission of the two gentlemen, I recall the other day when I was part of the committee deliberations, I posited the question, if a Filipino commits a crime in Russia, punishable by death, since under Russian laws that there is death penalty, can the Philippines extradite that Filipino national to prevent the imposition of the death penalty? The Undersecretary of Justice was not able to answer. The Department of Foreign Affairs was not able to answer.
The correct answer is we will not extradite a Filipino back to Russia because they will not do it also with their own citizen. So reciprocity is the principle, Mr. President.
No, Mr. President. My question is if a Filipino national commits a heinous crime, or if that's the proper offense punishable by death in Russia, in Moscow, and to punishable by death, and to prevent the imposition of the death penalty, our government would want to extradite that Filipino citizen. Would that be allowed under this treaty?
It does not fall under the definition of extradition, Mr. President. Maybe some other treaty, maybe exchange of prisoners is the one which we should pursue, but not this extradition treaty, because the definition of extradition is you are removing from the jurisdiction of one state a person for transferring him to the jurisdiction of the other state precisely to either answer for an offense committed in that requesting state or to serve sentence already.
Yes, the reason why I asked that question again is that it was printed in, I forgot the broadsheet today, that the Undersecretary of Justice mentioned a similar situation. His answer yesterday, and the transcript would show that there was a similar situation. I'm not referring to the Veloso case, that there was a similar situation which he was not able to answer yesterday. Just to clarify that,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President.
To clarify everything, if our kababayan commits a crime in another country, then he's subject to the jurisdiction of that other country.
And under this treaty, if that kababayan who commits a crime in Russia comes back to the Philippines, he cannot be extradited by Russia.
By us.
No.
We,
No, you should
Russia
be
comes
correct.
back, sir. You said the facts are Filipino commits a crime in Russia, is able to come back to the Philippines. Russia requests for his extradition. We will not. Because he's our citizen. We will not. Because the other way around, they will also not extradite their own citizen.
Very interesting. That is very peculiar to this particular treaty because of the constitutional
Yes, sir.
prohibition.
Because flowing out of the Russian Federation Constitution, they cannot also waive that benefit or right of their citizen. So, if they will insist on that right for their citizen, may reciprocity, sabi rin natin, kami rin gano'n. So, payag naman po sila. Payag naman po sila.
Huh?
So you mean to say,
Mr. President, I heard the question of the majority leader, what is this all for? A Russian commits a crime in Russia, is found in the Philippines, he is not our citizen. We will return him to Russia. Or some other, a citizen of some other country commits a crime in Russia, is found in the Philippines, we can bring...
But if a Russian commits a crime in Manila, goes back to Russia, we cannot request for extradition.
we cannot request
They
for
will, they will
extradition?
not extradite. By
And
virtue,
what will they do with the Russian? Even if he has committed a crime in another country?
Give him vodka.
basta but we cannot use the extradition treaty to compel Russia, to request Russia to return its national back to us. But
We get the point, but for example...
other channels, maybe we can do some other things, but not the extradition, not cite or use the extradition treaty. Ano sagot dun sa what else?
Like for example, a Russian massacres an entire family in Batangas, and then leaves and goes to
Pakinggan niyo yung example niya, pero we cannot use the extradition.
St. Petersburg, to Russia. What
They
can
will-
we do?
They will not extradite, Mr. President.
And they will. What will they do with the Russian?
Well, we cannot, all I can say is that we cannot use the extradition treaty. But maybe,
Yes, they understand the point, but what I'm driving at is a different level of how we can go beyond what is contained in the extradition treaty that we are going to approve. Is there a DFA move or there is a reciprocal resolution to that effect from the DFA?
nangyari na ganyan situation na pumunta sa abroad na hindi ma-extradite.
If you were America, impose trade.
We can, because we don't know the laws of the various countries, but we can hope that there's a Russian law which penalizes
A Russian.
an extraterritoriality crime committed in other countries. But as of, for the moment, Mr. President, all I can say is that we cannot use the extradition treaty to request for the return of that Russian from Russia back to us.
All right.
we cannot.
Can your committee, kind sir, can your committee research on that particular issue?
We will ask
Anyway, we can
yes,
take
Mr.
this up on
President,
Monday.
we will ask the DFA for if we have encountered such an actual factual situation. Yeah. And then the practice of other countries, so that we can probably get some idea on how they confront such an issue.
All right.
Yes, Mr. President.
Minority Leader.
Just a point which I would like the good sponsor to look into is the proposed anti-terror bill, because of the extraterritorial provisions in that bill. I am not prepared to discuss that at this point, but may I request the good sponsor that in the next opportunity, this issue should be included in
addressed,
his explanation.
Mr. President, with the permission.
What does the sponsor say?
Yes, we will take, we will study the anti-terror, the amendments to the Human Security Act with these extradition treaties in mind, all of our extradition treaties in mind also.
Mr.
Senator
President,
Tolentino has an input, Mr. President.
during the
Senator
deliberation,
Tolentino.
during the committee deliberation the other day, I explicitly stated what the good minority leader mentioned a while ago. How would this jibe with the proposed Human Security Act, considering the transnational long-arm apprehension measures that can be initiated by the Philippine government? The Undersecretary of Justice as well as the Foreign Affairs representative were also at a loss for words. So this is probably very timely, Mr. President, because apparently the purpose of this, the purpose of the good sponsor is to include terrorism, which is a part of that other measure as part of this extradition measure, because I mentioned Slovenia Bratva, a 5,000-man Russian mafia, which is based in Moscow, which is also involved in terrorism. So how will we now apply Philippine laws if even in this mere extradition treaties, we are at a loss in enforcing, in terms of enforcement? How will we apply the long arm of our laws if we approve that Human Security Act, Mr. President? I posited that question to the good sponsor, and perhaps your response, Mr. President, can be incorporated in that other measure sponsored by Senator Lacson, Mr. President. Thank you.
But Mr. President, subject to further study, if we pass a law which penalizes a lot of acts, even if the act is committed outside of Philippine territory, but from the point of view of Philippine law, that's a criminal offense in the Philippines. Yes, and we have an extradition treaty with the country where that person is found and that person is not disqualified to be extradited, then theoretically, we can ask for extradition because there is, from our point of view, there is an offense committed.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yeah,
A specific example. A Russian citizen plots or is engaged in a terrorist plot against the Philippines. From Chechnya, some extremists there. Under the proposed anti-terror, how do you call that? The anti-terror bill. That Russian is subject to punishment, to life imprisonment in our country. So this will defeat the purpose of that law.
Actually, if he is found in Russia, we cannot request for his extradition. Okay, but without this extradition treaty, there is nothing also to look forward to. We cannot request for an extradition. That's why we need this treaty to extradite people who are not disqualified to be extradited. That is the advantage. Because without this treaty, we cannot even ask for anybody to be extradited back to us. Pero except that there are, just like us, we have constitutional limitations, the Russian Federation has constitutional limitations. So that's the reality. So we adjust to their constitution, and then since they have that rule, out of reciprocity, sir, we also made that our rule.
Yes. Anyway, Mr. President, we are not closing the debate this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
It is best that the good sponsor take these questions into account with the next time we take this bill up.
All right. Just as an example also, again, before we recognize Senator Tiveros, the distinguished sponsor, are the extradition treaties we have in other countries the same as this one that we are approving? Like, for example, Hong Kong. Hong Kong national.
Okay.
We have an extradition treaty with Hong Kong.
Yes, sir,
I know
yes,
that,
sir.
for example, for a fact.
Okay, the Russian treaty has a section there. who shall be refused extradition. So, shall. In all the rest, discretionary. Discretionary.
Wala.
Ibig sabihin, the other countries where we have extradition treaties with may or may not extradite the citizens back to the Philippines. Desisyon po ng kanilang local procedure doon.
Is that, why? Is
But
it
in the
silent provision or there is a provision for that?
May, sir, ang sa treaties natin may.
May.
Meaning to say that maybe their constitution does not prevent it. But sa Russia kasi it prevents the extradition.
I see. So this is a very peculiar to Russia.
Yes, of the constitution, sir.
Anyway, as the minority leader said, we will not be closing it today. So, Senator Ontiveros.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand from the good sponsor that the second unique provision in the proposed extradition treaty refers to Filipinos who may not be extradited to Russia and Russians who may not be extradited to the Philippines. Ang tanong ko po, Mr. President, what if there is a Russian who is accused of political crimes and may seek asylum or to become a refugee here in the Philippines? Are such persons also exempted from extradition back to Russia? As I understand, in my consultation with the minority leader, is a provision in our other extradition treaties with other countries, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the given facts are governed by a very specific provision in the treaty. Article 3, grounds for refusal. Extradition shall be refused in any of the following circumstances. And the number one is if the offense for which the extradition is requested is regarded by the requested state as a political offense. So Philippines can, if we deem the offense that Russia says he committed as political, then we can say we are invoking Article 3 to refuse the request.
Then thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that reassurance of the good sponsor that that standard provision in our other extradition treaties with other countries is also present in this proposed treaty bilang long-standing tradition and principle, as the good sponsor, as a lawyer, knows better than this representation, long-standing principle and tradition in international human rights law and international humanitarian law. Napapanahon din kasi gunita lang natin ang International Human Rights Day kahapon lamang. Salamat po, Mr. President, at sa good sponsor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, all our colleagues to study these two resolutions further. I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Resolution number 263 and 264.
Hearing no objection, consideration measures suspended.
Mr. President,
Both measures.
thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are in receipt of the transmittal from the House of Representatives on House Concurrent Resolution number 5. I move that we consider House Concurrent Resolution number 5 and request the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order. Secretary will read the title of the measure.
House Concurrent Resolution number 5, concurrent resolution granting consent to His Excellency Raul S. Hernandez, former Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of the Philippines to the Republic of Korea from May 28, 2014 to 30 April 2019, to receive the award of the Order of Diplomatic Service Merit First Class from the Government of the Republic of Korea.
Mr. President,
yes.
Upon the request of the Chair of the Committee on Foreign Relations, I move that we concur and adopt House Concurrent Resolution number 5. Before we do that, there's a manifestation from our colleagues.
Senator Tolentino is recognized.
Mr. President, just a belated manifestation. Just for the record, I almost forgot. Almost 2 decades ago, year 2000 to be exact. And this is part of my manifestation that I'll be joining as co-author the bill relative to the Good Manners and Right Conduct Bill, Senate Bill 1224. Almost 2 decades ago, Mr. President, I launched the City of Character program in Tagaytay, which is still being implemented until today. It's a program which is very holistic, involving schools, business, the church, etc. It was a program that I expanded to include the cities of Calapan, Iriga, Bais and Negros, Candon and Ilocos Sur, and other cities, Mr. President. That's why I believe the bill, Senate Bill 1224 is very timely, Mr. President. And
Your Honor, before you continue, Majority Leader,
Yes, Mr. President.
what is the topic of the gentleman? Does it have anything to do with your motion?
I think, Mr. President, it's a totally different topic, Mr.
Oh,
President.
Well, let's,
My apologies to Senator Tolentino. I thought the manifestation was about the concurrent resolution. Maybe we'll act on the concurrent resolution first, and then before we adjourn, we will recognize Senator
I
Tolentino.
withdraw my manifestation, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, thank you.
Belatedly will.
He's still
I got
excited
distracted
for
by
his 3
Senator
gold medals,
Bobadilla.
Mr. President.
Yes, so again, let's call on the previous question. Are
Yes, Mr.
you
President.
asking Senator Pimentel to sponsor?
Yes, Mr. President.
I see.
I believe he wants
Senator
to.
Pimentel is recognized first to sponsor
Thank you,
the
Mr. President.
concurrent resolution.
Thank you. To represent one's country and people is one of the greatest honors one can aspire for. Our revered athletes prove that at the 30th Southeast Asian Games, and our OFWs, by their industry skills and good repute, show the world the best of the Filipino. Within the ranks of government, it is our diplomats, the men and women of the Philippine Foreign Service, who undertake this time-honored task day in and day out. Over the course of their careers, and wherever duty takes them, they are expected to serve as our country's best foot forward. Or even, as the good Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Teddy Boy Locsin, would say, as the velvet glove holding the iron fist. In short, our diplomats are expected to be the best. This is why the Philippine Foreign Service admits only those that make it through one of the most exacting and rigorous admission examinations in our civil service. We are long past the era of diplomacy associated only with black tie receptions and functions. Today's diplomats wear far more hats. This is certainly the case for our Filipino diplomats. They engage in ceremony and protocol, yes, but they also readily roll up their sleeves and be at the spearhead in danger zones. They negotiate, create access for our goods, influence perceptions of our country, and serve the welfare and interests of our kababayans overseas. In dispensing their duties and fostering relations between the Philippines and their host countries, the host country itself often finds undeniable great merit in what they do, so much so that they themselves deem our diplomats' contributions worthy of their highest recognition. Such is the case with our former envoy to the Republic of Korea, now ambassador to Turkey, His Excellency Raul Hernandez. The Republic of Korea has found his service to Philippines-Korea relations meritorious and deserving of the first grade of the Order of the Diplomatic Service Merit of the Republic of Korea government. One of South Korea's highest civilian awards, the Order of Diplomatic Service Merit, consists of 5 grades and is awarded to an individual who has rendered outstanding meritorious service in the interest of enhancing national prestige and promoting amity with allies. The first grade of the Order of Diplomatic Service Merit, otherwise known as the Gwanghwa Medal, is conferred to ambassadors and other high-level diplomats, including foreign officials, who have notched such noteworthy accomplishments towards strengthening friendly relations with the Republic of Korea. Past notable recipients of the award include United States Senator Joe Lieberman, His Royal Highness Prince Hendrik of Denmark, and Her Royal Highness Princess Maha Chakri Sirindhorn of Thailand. In this distinguished company, not only Ambassador Hernandez is honored by the Republic of Korea, but the Philippines as well, and the abiding amity between our nations. during his almost 5-year tenure as our country's top envoy to the Republic of Korea from May 28, 2014 to April 30, 2019, Ambassador Hernandez served with distinction. He fostered stronger bilateral relations with the Republic of Korea, a country that is emerging to be one of our most important bilateral partners in trade, in FDI, in ODA, defense, tourism, and even culture and people-to-people exchanges. Some of his notable achievements include supporting the efforts of the Department of National Defense in engaging the Republic of Korea as a key partner in defense procurement and acquisitions, supporting the effort to secure market access for our processed chicken into the $300 million Korean market for this commodity, promoting the country as a cultural and tourism destination, which helps sustain the Republic of Korea's standing as the top source of foreign tourists to our shores, and enhancing the extension of enhancing the extension of consular and assistance to nationals services to our Filipinos in the Republic of Korea. It is a fitting recognition to a storied career. Ambassador Hernandez has also previously served as Consul General in Xiamen and DFA spokesperson. Mindful of the requirement mandating the acceptance of foreign government decorations to be contingent upon the consent of Congress, I have the privilege to move that this august body now grant such consent to the conferment of the first grade of the Order of Diplomatic Service Merit of the Republic of Korea on Ambassador Raul Hernandez by adopting the House Resolution number 5, which we just received. And I thank the Majority Leader for allowing me to sponsor the motion. I so move, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Minority Leader, Senator Frank Dillon is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And I am taking this opportunity to join the good sponsor in endorsing this bill or this House resolution for our concurrence. I have known Ambassador Raul Hernandez, and he is a gentleman of the highest order. He is a very competent representative of our country. I have had occasion to interact with him when he was ambassador of the Philippines to South Korea, and therefore he is deserving of this consent that we are giving for him to accept this award. It is on that premise, Mr. President, that I join the good sponsor in urging the Chamber to immediately approve the resolution concurring with the consent given by the House of Representatives. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
All right. Yes.
I know also know Raul Hernandez as having been a spokesman of the DFA, a very good one at that, and a very good ambassador. Although I have some reservations, but I'm not going to say it anymore. Because I think during my time as Secretary of Tourism, it was a department who tried to get a lot of tourists here with the help of ambassadors like Raul Hernandez. And that's what started the charter flights from Philippine Airlines and Korean Airlines to come here. But nonetheless, this does not take away from the great service of Raul Hernandez. And I'd like to join my good friend, Senator Dillon, and I'm sure all the others here, in expediting this resolution so that, he deserves it, and I think we should give it to him. Thank you.
Mr. President, with the permission of the sponsor, if we can be made, all of us here today be made co-sponsors of the measure.
The resolution allows the ambassador to receive the award.
Yes. So
Right. If I recall it right, we did pass such a resolution also for Senator Frank Dillon.
That's correct, Mr. President. When he received this Order of the Rising Sun
Yeah, Japan.
in Japan.
I was about to ask that question with the permission of the Majority Floor Leader, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr.
Should we
Yes,
not
Senator
give
Robert.
the, although we did, we already did, yeah, that's right. I remember I was one of those who stood up to commend our Senate President for getting the Order of the Rising Sun.
Rising Sun.
That's right.
Banzai.
Yes, thank you.
Is there order of the setting sun?
Malas yan, Mr. President. Sabi ng Feng Shui, yung setting sun malas. Rising sun
Rising sun.
is always good. Feng Shui.
And we authorized Senator Drilon to accept his award. This
Yes,
time
Mr.
it is
Ambassador Raul
Hernandez
S. Hernandez.
to receive from the Republic of Korea. All right. So what do we do with the motion of Senator
Mr.
Pimentel?
President, I move that we concur and adopt House Resolution,
All
or
right.
concur to Resolution number 5.
Any objection? Hearing none, the Senate adopts House Concurrent Resolution number 5.
Mr. President, with that, I move that we adjourn session.
No, wait.
Yes,
We
Mr.
can now recognize Senator Tolentino.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
For his
My
manifestation.
apologies, Mr. President. I'm excited to watch the U2 concert
He's,
3 hours away by car. So may I hope that the Senate, we recognize Senator
Yes,
Tolentino
Senator
for his very short manifestation.
for his stunted manifestation.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I would have invoked Riddick's rule that once a member has been assigned the floor, that member is entitled to be heard without interruption. But belatedly, Mr. President, I realized that my manifestation is not germane to the previous question.
Correct,
That's why I acceded to the request of the good sponsor that I withdraw my manifestation. Be that as it may, I now proceed with my belated manifestation, Mr. President. I join the sponsors of Senate Bill 1224, institutionalizing comprehensive good values education as a core subject, including good manners and right conduct, and to place on the record that as early as 2001, I instituted, modesty aside, a similar program in Tagaytay City called the City of Character Program, incorporating all good values in business, in church, in schools. In fact, we have a character quality every month. All the classrooms of Tagaytay are named after character qualities such as hard work, discipline, patience, among others. And in that year, Mr. President, I can still recall that I formed a Cities of Character program, including the cities of Iriga, Bais in Negros, Candon in Ilocos Sur, and Calapan, to name a few, in Mindoro. This is a very important piece of legislation. Ito po yung hinihintay noon namin dahil kami-kami lang yung nag-uusap. Ngayon magkakaroon na ng national legislation. This is very timely. I congratulate Senators Gatchalian, Zubiri, and Villanueva. Sasama po, and Senator Gordon, who is right here beside me. So, thank you, Mr. President, for that brief manifestation.
Thank you. Senator Gordon.
I was just taken aback when the gentleman from Cavite said he will withdraw his manifestation. So, I'm going to send him money from Jaime Marcos, Mr. President.
Chocolate gold coins.
All right. Anyway, just for the record, so that it will be clear, the point raised by Senator Tolentino is correct. Once you're given the floor, you cannot be interrupted.
Yes.
But you can be called out of order.
That's correct, Mr. President.
That was the problem
The
earlier.
point of order there, kasi
Oh.
is what we tackled a separate item altogether.
Yes, it was a different item.
Yes.
All right, just to set the record straight.
Yeah.
All right.
With that, Mr. President?
Go ahead.
No further topics on our agenda, Mr. President. Move that adjourn session. We adjourn session until December 16, Monday at 3 p.m. 2019. I so move.
Any objection?
Thank you, Mr.
Hearing
President.
none. Session is adjourned until December 16, 3 o'clock in the afternoon of December 16, 2019.